Hello and welcome to the D
and A of Home Interiors, the podcast which is all about empowering you to make confident interior and furnishing decisions for your home. I'm Audrey, founder of Audrey Whelan Interior Design.
And I'm Deirdre, founder of youfurnish.com, such 100 plus furniture retailers on one website. The DNA of Home Interiors is proudly sponsored by checkatrade.com. If you need help with your next home improvement project, you can search from over 39,000 recommended, vetted and monitored trades on checkatrade.com. Audrey, it's often said that the kitchen is the heart of the home, but actually, in my opinion, the dining table is the heart of the home because it's where everybody comes together to break bread and share the food and the stories of the day or what's about to happen in the day if we think of breakfast time. What are your thoughts around dining tables? And in particular, interested to think about there's so many options out there and how do we build it into the room and what's right for us and what's right for our family and the size and guess there's nearly too much to think about. Where do we begin?
Yeah, well, as you say, so many options out there. I think it can be confusing often for people. And I think, this is an area where it's not just about the aesthetic kind of consideration. Oh, I love round tables and I love wooden tables, therefore I'll go for a round wooden table. I think, it's really, really useful to think beyond that. And so I suppose one big consideration I'd always look at is the space, the size of the space, actually planning that out and looking at what is realistic, because there's nothing worse than maybe having a table that's too big in the space. Maybe there isn't enough room between the wall and the table to really comfortably get in and out. So therefore people don't end up going around the table. Maybe they sort of sit around a breakfast bar or on the sofa or something. But, if you really do want to have those family meals around the table, then I think it's good to kind of almost be honest with yourself and look at what's really realistic in that space, and how to fit it in the best possible way.
I think that's a great point. We have a dining table in our dining room at home and nobody wants to go in on the inside because you're stuck in there.
Yes, yeah, I've seen that so many times where people might think, well, there isn't room to sort of pull in now chairs, so let's put a bench in at the wall. But if it's a really long table, then, the people in the middle of the bench, do tend to feel like they're a bit kind of stuck in there. So actually, one of my favourite solutions, which has come about quite a few times now in various projects, is actually where space is limited to put a corner bench, but actually with a round table. So it means that you can fit some extra people in. So it's essentially like an L-shaped bench. But because you don't have a square or a rectangular table, you get a lot less of that sort of issue around people feeling wedged in. But you can actually put quite a few people round the table. And then you can also have a few chairs, on the outside part. So it means if it's maybe a family with children and on occasion there's only 2 or 3 of them there, they can sort of use the chairs and maybe have one person on the bench. But then if they've got more people round, they can maybe fit up to 8 people round the table by using the full bench.
That's a great idea. It reminds me of your tip if you've got an L-shaped sofa to put a round coffee table, because again, people can get in and out. So it's that sort of same learnings and same application, but for a different feature of the house.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's just a classic example of that idea of looking at the flow of the space. So not really starting out just in terms of what you think you like or don't like, but actually realistically kind of assessing what you've got space for and what's going to work.
Yeah. And then how much space do we actually need, going back to, we've talked about what you might do if you're stuck on space, but when we're measuring out, when we have our space before we put any table and chairs in there, how much space do we actually need to allow for?
Well, if you're going to have a rectangular table, like the first idea I mentioned, I mean, ideally you would have close to a metre between it and the wall. If you actually want to be able to put those chairs in and walk around the whole table and then comfortably pull the chairs out for people to sit in, that would give you enough room then that, you know, if some people are sitting and other people want to get in and out, they can walk behind the chairs. So it's when you kind of have less than that metre then that you start to get into the situation that we first described, where maybe people do feel a bit sort of hemmed in. But if you think about, you know, say it was like 60 centimetres, but if you think of that between the wall and a round table, you've only got a tiny bit of that round table that has that constraint of the space between the wall and the table, whereas with the square or the rectangular table, then that constraint is the whole way along. So it is, you know, a bit more of an issue in that sense. So that will be the kind of size to think about around the table. And then in terms of the overall floor space you'd need, that really depends what shape of table it is. So I would say, you know, rectangular tables tend to come in like 800, so 80 centimeters in width upwards. And then your length could be, well, really as much as you can fit in. But typically you'd see maybe 80 by 1.2 meters, 1.4 meters and upwards from there. Then in terms of round tables, I'd say the biggest you'd really go is 1.2 meters as a table, because beyond that, you stop being able to reach into the middle of the table. So if you had things to share or other things that you wanted to reach in the center, you know, you start to almost need one of those lazy Susans. I don't know if you know those, where you can rotate something around the
I
middle.
was going to say it's
Yeah.
the thing in some of the Chinese restaurants I've been in
exactly
where you
it.
can
Yeah,
spin it round.
yeah.
So that's called a lazy Susan.
That is it, yes. Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah,
love
I
it,
do.
love it.
I really have memories of those from my childhood in Ireland. In certain Chinese restaurants, they'd have them in the middle. So those tables then would be beyond that 1.2 meters. And, you know, quite often you'd get these really large groups of people then who would sit round, you know, this round table. So kind of extended families. But I mean, the downside, apart from not being able to reach into the middle, is that obviously once you get beyond a certain size of table, it becomes more difficult for everybody to kind of speak together.
Yeah. And what about square tables?
Yes, I love square tables. So I think, you know, obviously I've sort of, you know, favoured round there for kind of tight spaces. But I think, yeah, square can be a brilliant alternative to that, because unlike the rectangular tables, where the bigger you go, the less people can sort of communicate with each other at either end of the table.
Yeah.
You know, a square gives you a little bit of a feature like a round one, where everybody, you know, is a bit more balanced in that way, I suppose, round the edges. So you might have 8 people, then maybe 2, 2 and 2, and that's quite a sensible size. Again, if you went beyond that, it would start to feel too big, where you
I was
can't
going to
kind of
say,
reach
yeah,
in.
there must be a limit on how
Yeah.
many people you can put around in the square.
Yeah.
So we have actually a square one at home, and we do sort
Okay,
of two,
yeah.
2, 2, 2.
Yeah.
Now it's extendable, so you
Oh,
could
yeah,
put extra
brilliant.
people in down the side, but
Yeah.
we've never quite done that. We've always sort of just squeezed in an extra person if we need.
Yeah. Well, that's what I quite like about sometimes with a square table, you can put an extra person maybe along one side, or if there's a few children as part of the group, you know, you might be able to put you know, sort of more than one extra person. And the same with the round table as well, the fact that, you know, maybe if you've got sort of 5 or 6 people in your family, but then you have 1 or 2 extra, if it is you know, a larger round table, so kind of up to that 1.2 meters, like I said, then, you know, you'll find you can pretty much get 8 people around that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And then, so we've talked about sort of the table and what the shape of it should be. Then does the shape impact, because you've mentioned a bench with a
Yes,
round
yeah.
table, which counterintuitively I sort of wouldn't have put that together at the start, but it makes a lot of sense. But how should we think about chairs versus dining benches, or what other solutions are there? And how do we think about what is that right type of chair to put with our table?
Yeah, so I suppose there was a time where a lot of dining tables were sold with chairs, so as like a dining set. And although that still exists, I think it's something that's kind of maybe seen a bit less, or just that we've got so many other options, as separates to buy that, it's not sort of essential to look at them in that kind of, grouping, if you like. And I quite like the idea of kind of mixing and matching. So not, well, I should really say not matching as such, but mixing rather. So not feeling like you're limited to a wooden table must have wooden chairs, or something like that. The mix of materials could be, for example, you might have a marble top table and then maybe you've got wooden chairs, or maybe you've got upholstered chairs. So there's quite a nice contrast there. Say if it was upholstered chairs, obviously I'm mindful that for some people that's not an option because, they want more practical chairs. But if we just take that as an example for a minute, the contrast between maybe a soft fabric and the marble table, then, you've got sort of something soft to the touch and something quite sleek and smooth, and that can work really well. Even the contrast of the wooden chair with the marble table can work good as well, because the wood is like a softer, sort of has a softer texture to it than the marble. So, I quite like combinations like that. I also quite like the idea of sometimes mixing chairs, so not even having all the chairs the same. That can work particularly well if your table is maybe more of an industrial style. So it could be like a table with the reclaimed wooden top, and then maybe you'd go for a selection of chairs. You might have one or two maybe painted metal chairs, one or two maybe in a wood or a different wood finish to the table, and maybe one or two in a black or a white, so you can kind of mix things up that way. And no doubt in a family then people will sort of have their favorite chair. So somebody might quite like a chair with a soft seat. Then for the kids it might be more practical to have maybe the metal ones, or ones that are easy to wipe down.
You can wipe down all the food.
Yeah. That's it. And also it's easy to add to that kind of scenario over time then as well, sort of if you need more seating.
Because I've always loved the idea of your long rectangular table and the two heads of the table, or the head and the bottom of the table. I'm thinking of a castle and those long
Yes.
dining tables, and
Yeah.
those two at either end are more dramatic.
Yeah.
So I've always liked the idea of having different chairs, and I've seen benches being used actually really well, which I think can be really good, especially for little kids, because they don't need as much space
Yeah.
either. So
Yeah.
all of these solutions are very good. And you mentioned to me earlier, Audrey, a dining sofa.
Yes.
Tell us more, because I had not heard of this.
This is one of my next aims in life, I think, to have a dining sofa. So I spotted my first dining sofa last October, I think it was. It was actually in Whitstable, so I was away for a weekend, and as I do, of course, I was browsing all the furniture shops there. And there's a furniture shop, a Scandinavian shop, and they had this what they were calling a dining sofa. So I'd never actually heard that term before, and I thought it was fascinating because I suppose it's one step on from a bench. So when we think of a bench, we tend to think of something probably a little bit more on the utilitarian side. So as you said, really practical to pop more people in, great with kids, pile them in. You're not limited to the number of chairs you have. But often I think when people think of a bench, they're not sort of thinking ultimate comfort, unless maybe it's built in and it's got quite nice cushions on it and things. But the dining sofa kind of takes it up a level, because essentially this looked like a sofa, but a kind of what would you say, a more streamlined sofa, if you like. So less deep and a bit higher than a sofa you would have sort of typically in a living room. So it doesn't take up as much room, kind of floor space wise, but then it's got that slightly higher seat. So it's compatible with having dining chairs then, around the rest of the table. So I thought that was quite nice. And the idea then that if you really want a dining table kind of area where you can linger and relax, as well as just, thinking of it purely for eating and running off maybe, then, I thought that was quite a nice idea.
So it's nearly like in a restaurant. Sometimes you see they have the benches, but it's not. When I think of a bench, I think of just a plain bench with no padding, I think of it as being quite hard.
Yeah.
And, your back gets tired potentially. But then when I think of restaurants, some of them have really nice sort of inbuilt benches. I'm calling it a bench as well, so it's probably
I'd
not the
say,
right.
yeah, like a banquette, probably. That's kind of traditionally how it'd be
So they've got
called.
like padding at the back. Maybe they've got some cushions so you can sit back afterwards.
Yeah.
But it's not like, when I picture a sofa, I'm like, I'll be way down below and I'll be slouched and it just won't work either.
Yeah. So it's like the functionality of the banquette, except that it's not built in. So I suppose the advantage is that, if you wanted to move it slightly around the room or have it on the other side of your table sometimes, or, move house and bring it with you. So, you've got all that flexibility. And I suppose the other thing it has, which the banquettes often don't have, is, it's got arms at either end. So, you could imagine yourself kind of tucking into the corner of it maybe, and I don't know, even putting your feet up on it, I'm not sure. But yeah, it looked quite relaxing.
I'm a big
to me
fan
anyway.
of that.
Yeah.
I know it's a faux pas as I sit here with my legs crossed underneath me at my dining table. So what's the advice then, Audrey, around extendable tables? Because of course you will need more chairs.
Yes.
What do you do with the chairs when you're not using them ordinarily? And there is some good ones that you can sort of stack, but maybe you're just throwing them then into a cupboard or someplace if you've got that storage ability. But there's some beautiful chairs, and I think where else can you use those chairs? Because sometimes it's nice to have a chair in a bedroom. So why not place that chair in the bedroom when it's not being used?
Exactly, yeah. So I think this is where this solution of having different chairs, selection of different chairs can work extra well, because sometimes the problem is you think, I want to have kind of 10 chairs in total, but I'm only normally going to have 6 in the dining room or the kitchen, wherever that table is. So I've got 4 chairs to kind of dispose of or store, dispose of around the house, for want of a better word, or store away somewhere. But I think often the challenge then is the chairs you would have in your dining room or kitchen may not be, a chair that exactly suits the bedroom or somewhere else that you want to put it. So I think if you've kind of opened up that flexibility and you're mixing a little bit, even if it's that you've got 6 similar chairs that remain in the kitchen normally, but then the additional ones maybe are different. So you can find that balance then between something that you would like to have, in a bedroom, in a study, and maybe
the hallway,
kid's bedroom, anywhere else, that you need a chair or, would be happy to position a chair. Then I think, you can find that middle ground where it looks good and feels good in the kitchen or dining area, but it also works somewhere else. There is another idea then as well, which is, if you think anybody's happy to sit on stools, this can work quite well if you've got children who would be happy to sit on stools maybe. That they can act as your additional seat. So now there's some stools out there, I've often done this before, where it's almost like a stool that would double up as a side table. So it might be something that you could use in a living area beside a sofa, but you're not going to miss it if you need to move it into the kitchen temporarily, if you've got guests staying. So that can be quite handy, or, at a kid's desk or something, or just, if you've got a playroom or a kid's room. So I find those little pieces of furniture that you can pop something on top of as a little side table are so useful if you've got a few rooms, in your home to be able to move around. And then if you can sit on them as well, it's another way to double up.
Yes. And of course, you can always have your collapsible sort of chairs that foldable chairs if you need, and maybe just dress them up with some cushions or something like that to make them look a little bit more appealing.
Yeah, I think with the outdoor furniture as well becoming more a kind of, what would you say, more integrated visually, probably just with furniture in the home. It's a good opportunity as well if you do need outdoor furniture to even think of something that might double up temporarily inside, if you need additional chairs.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. It's something I do with my 2 balcony dining chairs. I bring them into the dining area when I have guests around, because I don't have other chairs or any place really to store them. So that definitely gets done by me after they get a little bit of a dust down for any cobwebs or anything, depending upon when I've last used them. Quick shout out for our sponsor, checkatrade.com. Search recommended tradespeople online with checkatrade.com. have a wooden dining table. I really, really like it, but I do notice that it gets scratched. And it's probably okay because we're only two adults. But how should we think about materials? And it probably varies as well because people have a dining table in their kitchen, but they might also have a dining table in their dining room, which only really gets good use. So you'll have to sort of think about the purpose and the use of your dining table and then what material would suit that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like there's a few things I would generally consider when making decisions around materials. So exactly as you said, kind of the function and the purpose needs to be, if you're concerned with a table that's going to show wear and tear, yeah, obviously wood does, require a bit more care than some other materials. I mean, glass can feel quite good, but you do have to be careful that you don't sort of break things on it. Obviously it can get scratched, but you don't have to worry about kind of ring marks on it, from putting drinks down or teas and coffees like you do on a wooden surface. And equally with a marble or something like a quartz. So there's a lot of like stone look-alike surfaces that people would be generally probably more familiar with in terms of worktop materials in a kitchen. But quite often now you'll see that you can get dining tables with those types of surfaces, so they can be really, really durable. And marble itself, which I absolutely love, I actually have a marble table. I mean, you do need to wax it to make it stain proof, but I have to say, after living with it for a few years, it's actually behaved itself a lot better than I was anticipating in the beginning. So I think that's quite a good option. I certainly find that a lot easier to maintain than a wooden table, which I did have previously. But the other consideration then I would say is around what else is in the room. So if you've already got a kitchen in place, or maybe you're making decisions simultaneously about a kitchen that's going into the room, it's just really about whether you're trying to kind of match up a dining table with perhaps your worktop surface. But if you're looking for a more kind of eclectic look, maybe you want to add more contrast in by having something different. So, if it's a wood table, then maybe you want the sort of stone sleek worktops, or vice versa, to give that contrast in the room. So that's where I really like to kind of look at all those decisions in one go before committing to anything, and just seeing how many kind of hard surfaces you have, how many textured surfaces, and what kinds of different colors you're bringing in, even through your flooring and your wall color, and any fabrics such as if it is upholstered dining chairs or things like curtains and blinds in the room as well. So that should help then to kind of hone in on what that dining table, material would look best in.
Yes, I've actually seen some fabulous concrete tables lately.
Yes,
Now,
yeah.
I know they're quite expensive and obviously very heavy, but wow, they look amazing.
I love them too. Concrete tables and concrete worktops as well. Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely love.
I've seen a concrete, well, I'm going off piste here for a second, but concrete worktops whereby the rings, the hobs is actually built in, but you'd never know.
Yes,
It's amazing for conducting the heat.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's another story. So then based on that though, if I really want concrete or marble or wood, depending upon it, what one, how do I incorporate that style into maybe the overall style of the room? So if I'm in a farmhouse versus I have a minimalistic, which ones match with which styles?
Okay, well, I suppose, matching is one thing and then contrast is another thing. So, like I said before, kind of if you're trying to create more contrast, then I would say it's less about kind of what goes with what, but looking at the differences between them, and obviously, what you're happy with yourself. So, like the concrete then looks, typically looks really good with some wood, maybe with a wood grain, because the concrete is very smooth and it's very consistent in its appearance. So it's quite nice to match it with something that has variation in its appearance. So a wood grain then would give you that contrast. But then if you were trying to create something a little bit less rustic but very, very minimal, you might even say that you don't want that surface a variation in any of your materials. So you want to have the concrete with a white gloss door on your kitchen units, and your table is going to be glass. Maybe it's going to be an opaque glass, so like a back painted one in a colour, but again, it's a pure flat colour the whole way along. So do you see those differences depending on whether you kind of add in kind of textured things or not?
Yeah, you definitely, well, maybe you do. I wouldn't like everything very samey, but
No,
each
no.
to their own as well and whatever
Yeah,
they want. But
yeah.
obviously, that relationship to other things in the room is probably important to get right.
Yeah, yeah, it is. I mean, I just say, I mean, we've mentioned a few materials there in terms of sort of the woods, concrete, stone, and like marble in particular. We focused on the kind of man-made stones as well, like your worktop finishes, and then and glass. And then other materials that you could consider are like metal as well. So you see some zinc top tables, and that can be quite good because you tend to get a little bit of variation in the metal as well. So not really shiny, kind of more matte, more industrial. And then also other things like, say, terrazzo. You see sometimes now, so
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like can get you little specks of color in there. And, you know, in terms of something like terrazzo, you can almost think of your table like having another work surface made. So you could perhaps have a frame, and then the top, it's probably something you'd see less at the moment off the shelf, although there are more and more terrazzo items appearing. Whereas obviously kind of wood and, you know, marble, glass, things like that, you'll find more so off the shelf.
Yeah. And then the last thing that I want to chat about is actually dressing the table. So I think this is particularly important because, well, I've got dining mats because of the wooden table, and also coasters so that my hot glasses or mugs don't leave those rim stains. But I'm thinking of the glass table that you mentioned, and I've never really been comfortable with the glass table because I feel like I'm going to be looking down at everybody's legs.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, I don't know, it freaks me out a little bit. But how then should you, it'd be a shame if you have got a nice table to put a tablecloth over
Yeah.
it and hide it,
Yeah.
but maybe you can with your table mats and settings, you know, take away some of that harshness maybe of leaving either the table exposed or on the glass example that you don't want to see everybody's feet.
Yeah, well, first of all, actually, I'll just say on the glass, I mean, don't forget, it doesn't have to be clear glass. So, like I said earlier, you know, it could be, for example, opaque glass, like back painted with a color, or it could be like a sandblasted glass. So it could be something that is like semi-opaque. So you get that quite nice aqua shade then. So you can't see the whole way through it. So obviously within the glass kind of remit, there's lots of options. But if it was clear glass, which can be amazing in a small space where you really do want to kind of keep the feeling of space in the room. I do appreciate that, yes, some people don't like kind of being able to see through it. So I think mats are probably essential anyway, just because you don't want sort of ceramic, you know, crockery like banging against the glass is quite noisy, and obviously, you know, you're at risk of breaking things. So I think, you know, again, back to that contrast materials, like leather mats are quite good, or felt, you know, can be quite good. So depending on preferences, you know, felt opens up lots of options for different colors, but, you know, it's really nice to the touch and quite kind of warming against the sleekness of the glass.
I'm showing Audrey here my table mats, and
yeah.
they are made of little beads.
Yes, I know
Which
that
look
type.
really
Yes,
beautiful,
yeah.
and like they just catch the glimmer and the light, so it leaves to a really fancy sort of decorative look, especially when you've got a candle on it or night lighting. But
Yeah.
obviously they're terrible for trying to keep clean
Yes.
because there's so many little grooves, and it's something that I hadn't anticipated when I bought them. And again, we probably just about get away with it being two adults, but these would be totally impractical if you had children and daily spills going into them.
Yes, I can well imagine.
Something
Well,
to keep in mind.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I used to just have plain ones that you could, you know, clean quite easy. But at the moment, actually, since changing to the marble table, I must say I'm enjoying not needing any. It's just like paring it right back. Just, yeah, keep it simple. And you don't have to worry about, well, at least I don't worry about putting hot things down on the table like I used to do with the wooden table.
Sounds like marble is the winner then.
Well, currently for me, but
it's really important though, and I feel like I'm the boring practical one, but actually, we want our homes to look stylish and to reflect our personalities, but we also live in them. So on a day-to-day basis, it has to be very functional, and we've all got, busy lives, and especially if you've got children, so that time, laying the table, setting down the placemats, cleaning them afterwards, taking them up, versus being able to put a plate down. It is something actually that I really strongly believe that people should consider with all of their choices for whatever they're purchasing. And keeping and the upkeep and cleaning is a big part of it.
Yeah. Sometimes you don't know until you try something out. It's just like, you don't know how you'll use that room or how you'll use that piece of furniture. So I think, it's even an argument for if you have a temporary table and it's a rectangle, stick it in the room, use it for a while, just see how it feels. Can you move around it? Try out pulling in and out the chairs near the wall if that's where they are.
Yeah, I've saw a lot, and we've talked about this in our Dimensions podcast, but don't be afraid to actually use a bit of masking tape and mask out where the dining table would be, where the chairs would be, and get a sense of, would you be comfortable pulling in, walking around? If you have lots of dinner parties and you're going to be putting plates on front of people and you want to walk around behind them, can you do that? Because, it needs to work for you and how you're going to use it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's been fascinating, Audrey, and I think we've got all of the key information and decisions that we need to consider when purchasing a dining table.
If you enjoyed our podcast, we would be delighted if you could rate, review, and subscribe on your favourite podcast provider. This will help others who are seeking home and furnishing advice and inspiration discover the DNA of home interiors. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter at the DNA of Home Interiors.
If you are looking for inspiration and help in designing your home interiors, take a look at Audrey Whelan's masterclasses on audreywhelan.com/events. And don't forget to check out youfurnish.com, a search and comparison website which helps connect people with amazing furniture from over 100 retailers. We designed it to solve the problem we and thousands like us faced furnishing our homes. And now we are really excited that everyone can search, discover, compare and shop for their home all in one place.
Thank you to our sponsor checkatrade.com for their support in bringing this episode to you. And most importantly, thank you all for listening today.
We hope you can join us next time.